Hello and welcome to Transmission. I'm Reid, and tonight I'm joined by Sally Goldner, who I kind of feel as though needs probably no introduction. So Sally, welcome to the show.
Thank you, yeah. Hashtag Auntie Sally at Sal Goldzetso for the tweeters, yeah.
Yep. So, I mean, Sally, been involved quite heavily within the queer community, I suppose, for a number of years. How long do you think you've been involved?
I came out in 1995 and got more involved in the wider, well, rainbowish community in about 98. So, at the time of recording, it is 16 years. I'm a teen, yeah, that's about right, said the accountant, 16 years. So, yeah, it's been a long time. I'm a teenager, I'm legal and that sort of thing. And It's been a really interesting journey to look at it change over that time too.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of involvement with the community, you've done quite a lot of sort of advocacy work and that's sort of been something that you've been involved with, you know, for 16 years.
Yeah.
What exactly sort of inspired you to do so much stuff?
I think at the time I didn't know it. I was following my inner heart and soul and, you know, didn't know it. And it didn't actually really become clear until 2008-9. To be really diverse, I actually got an astrological reading that said I was born under a planet that wanted to talk about these topics. But I was just following my heart, really. Even if I didn't know that was my calling, I still thought, oh, maybe I'll just do this for a few years and then do a 9-to-5 job. But now my 9-to-5 job, which actually is paying as well, is advocacy, and I'm, you know, very much coming from my heart, which is a good place to be. Yeah.
So what sort of roles, I suppose, have you taken throughout over the years in terms of your advocacy?
It's been a few things. Media spokesperson, which is the original title I had with Transgender Victoria, and my role still encompasses that, which is obviously important to get an accurate viewpoint out about trans people. And I think that's been, you know, interesting over the years. The outright prejudice that we faced, say, 16 or 19 years ago, has shifted a lot. And now I think people know that they've got a fair idea, by and large, of what I call the 101, that we're just people who happen to have a gender identity different to what society expects given our body at birth, whatever. And now a lot more of it's saying, well, what are the policy implications for that? So it shifted from a very almost reactive position now to a much more proactive position. And the other part that came off that was doing training sessions and education. In the last 2 years, we've probably done more training than in the previous 10. And we're getting out to all sorts of places, corporates, service providers, housing, and in particular aged care, which is great as well, thanks to the federally funded project by the LGBTI Health Alliance. And that is just awesome that people will be able to assist people in aged care at their retirement. But it's all levels, uni talks, youth, you know, Melbourne, Geelong, Wodonga, which is fantastic and increases connectedness too.
So you found that there has been that shift between, because it seemed as though that there wasn't sort of a lot of visibility maybe 10 years ago, and so with the visibility has come that need for organisations and groups to get the education?
Definitely. I think people are very much aware now that there's things that they know that they don't know, whereas even, say, 2 years ago, they didn't know that they didn't know. And I can't, let's say, prove it, but I think it was campaigns like No to Homophobia and the Beyond Blue Left Hand campaign that made people realise, to say things, for example, like, that's so gay, or, you know, you're behaving like a girl, or whatever it was, made people realise, we can't do that in a workplace. But they wanted to know, how do we do it right? And so to go into a workplace and talk about how to make forms inclusive, or use the right pronouns, or whatever it is, and explain the nuances of the law, all those sorts of things is, you know, turning out to be really worthwhile, and they become more empowered allies as well.
Yeah, and so I know that a lot of your work has been in terms of, I suppose, the gender spectrum of the queer community, but you've also done some stuff in terms of with Bisexual Alliance.
That's it, Bisexual Alliance Victoria, and I think that's probably the next area, right? The evidence we have from reports such as Private Lives 2 tells us that bisexual health is unfortunately worse than gay and lesbian, and then binary trans, probably on a par with non-binary. And I think the next stage of development is what I call hashtag binary busting for bisexual, for non-binary trans, maybe for polyamorous as well. And I still feel, unfortunately, there is biphobia about. For example, a US college survey that found 15% of US college students still don't even think bisexuals exist. So I think that's probably, you know, the next level to crack, so to speak. And I think biased as I am, I think trans and bi who go beyond binary so much can really work together on this.
And I suppose that is a problem that I know in terms of the invisibility of bisexuality, because people will assume that if you're in a relationship with a male, then you're gay, or if you're in a relationship, then, you know, and so it is sort of that level of invisibility.
Well, yeah, people look at you in the relationship you're in at the time and call it either gay, lesbian or heterosexual, rather than looking over a lifetime where someone could be bisexual, pansexual. And for trans people, we can be any sexual orientation, heterosexual, gay, lesbian, bi, pan, asexual, which seems to be gaining in sort of understanding as well. There's still a way to go, because we're people like everyone else. And I think that's a really important thing. We can have a sexual orientation like anyone else, and we can just be people in terms of our occupation, our relationships, whether we want cats and or dogs in the backyard like anyone else, which is cool too.
Yeah. I suppose, so 16 years of advocacy work, what keeps you going?
It's about heart, it's about connectedness to the right energy sources, because there are down moments. I was recently at a conference where, and it was a very small gathering, and I had to face some very transphobic remarks from some older lesbians, and that is, that is difficult to deal with. But I have friends and supports, and I have managed to do my own sort of personal development over the years, which has been critical to me. And to borrow the title of the book by Anthony Van Brown, the fabulous person who's reconciling Christianity and GLBTI, or at least GLBdom, A Life of Unlearning. I've tried to unlearn the things that don't fit this soul and blow the fog away and get closer to the full person I am. And not just in terms of gender identity, sexual orientation, but all the things that I like, such as wearing crazy cat hoods and being a fan of World Wrestling Entertainment. Oh God, I've outed myself again. And all that sort of thing. I'm a person, who is all those attributes and many more. And I feel very much in a combination of peace and power now at the same time. And that's what's kept me going, and now I have a whole heap of good supports as well.
Well, that's fantastic. That's almost, I suppose, a message to try and get those supports and things. If you know, I suppose for anybody.
Well, totally. I think that I think that we have the proverbial distance to travel, and in varying degrees for, again, gay and lesbian, trans, bi and intersex, and breaking it down further. But I think usually there's a way to find one foot in the door now, with obviously internet and social media have been a major part, I think, in the improvement for trans, and will be for bi as well. And whereas 10 years ago they weren't there, of course. Yeah. And I think it just can be that one good connection, and then it might not be exactly the right one, but someone will say, oh yeah, but I know so-and-so who knows so-and-so, or whatever it is. And it's just, getting a grip on one link on the chain can make the difference. And of course, with search engines, I think it can be found. Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, I suppose we could talk, and it's time flies when having fun.
Yeah.
So we're unfortunately out of time, but thank you so much for coming on and just giving a little bit about sort of who you are. So big thank you to Sally Goldner. You've been watching Transmission.
Welcome back. This is Transmission. Buck Angel is the world's most famous transgender male porn star. Yeah, think about that for a second. Here he is with Sammy Cameron.
You're with Sammy Cameron, and this is Bent TV, and today I'm with Buck Angel.
Yeah, you are.
Thank you for coming and talking with Bent TV today. So I wanted you to tell us a little bit about your journey. When did you first figure out that your gender wasn't really the same as what it said on your birth certificate?
I think I started feeling that way maybe in my early 20s, but I didn't really know how to sort of, I always felt like a boy, but my parents were really cool about stuff like that. So it wasn't until like puberty and I realized, oh my God, I'm really a girl, but I feel like a boy. But then in my early 20s is when I really started feeling like I can't be living like this anymore. I don't feel comfortable being perceived as a woman when I feel like a guy, if that makes sense.
And you've got siblings? You've got a
Yeah, I have an older sister and a younger sister, yes.
So you're the middle one?
I'm the middle.
And how do you get along with them?
Well, actually, my whole family is amazing. They are very, very, very accepting of me and not any issues at all.
Did it start that way, though?
No. My family actually disowned me for many years because I was a really hardcore drug addict and alcoholic, and I was just out of my mind, and then nobody wanted to talk to me anymore, so my parents just stopped talking to me. And then I got sober. And when I got sober and I started to realize I could have my sex change, which is what we called it back in the day, then my family I sort of reinitiated a relationship with my family. And so my family now is amazing. They're very loving. They call me their son. My sisters, I'm their brother. And no one ever even talks about anything else but that.
They call you the right name. They don't misgender you.
No, not at all. My parents are super cool about stuff. Look at me.
I know.
I'm not their daughter anymore.
Actually, I noticed that. So tell me about what were the sorts of things that caused you to get into drugs? And was it related to your gender, do you think?
Of course, 100%. I used to think I was, not to say that I'm not an alcoholic, but really I didn't really understand. I thought my alcoholism came from it was genetic, and I was an alcoholic because my dad is an alcoholic and my grandfather. But I realized no. My alcoholism totally came from my gender stuff, and that I wasn't comfortable in my body, and I just didn't want to feel or think or look or have anything to do with who I physically was. I couldn't stand it. So I would get drunk and stoned and do all kinds of drugs and black out all the time.
Good way to black out from the real world.
Yeah, from the real world.
Way. What sort of things made you change? What sorts of things helped you sober up? Was it
it was life or death for me. And what happened was I was doing prostitution on the streets as a little boy. Even though I was a girl, I would dress up like a little boy, and I would do hand jobs on the street in West Hollywood, California, in the United States. And then one day I did a trick with a guy who really I should have been raped and killed, but somehow I got out of the situation. And it sort of opened my eyes to what am I doing? And then I ended up literally on the streets and called somebody, and they picked me up, and I got sober. And through my sobriety, everything became clear for me. I can't live like this anymore. I either have to change myself or I have to kill myself. Those were my options.
So it kind of got to it was really simple in the end.
In a sense, it was simple.
It was either die or make a change.
Make a change. And I was lucky enough to be able to find doctors. And when I did it, there were no doctors who did it. Both of my top surgery doctor and my hormone doctor had never worked with trans men before.
Wow. Tell me about haters. I mean, you've said some things over the years that you change your mind on, and we all do. But you're in the public eye.
It's called learning.
It is, isn't it? And we always
Of course, you say things. If you don't say things and you don't learn from them, then you're not a good educator. I mean, I'm an educator, so of course, and then also people have to understand that words evolve. Okay, so I think possibly you might be talking about use of the word tranny that I've said and got myself into a problem with.
You said sex change before. I'd never used that word these days.
How old am I? 51. I'm 51 years old. And when I had my change, it was called a sex change.
Yeah.
So yes, words evolve. So for me, it's a sex change. Yeah. I don't really care what everybody else thinks and whatever. Don't tell me. I'm actually an elder in the community. I changed way before many people fucking changed. Oops, am I allowed to say fucking?
I think you just did. So,
So here's the deal. That's what people try to check me.
So lots of people support you now. You feel like you've got a lot of supporters. You've got lots of Facebook likes.
I have tons of
awesome
supporters.
Movies that you've done.
I have haters.
You're like a pop star when you come here.
Well,
we just want to love to speak to you.
The thing is this, I'm a man who speaks my mind. And here's the deal. I've earned that privilege to speak my mind. Here's the other deal, is I completely respect people's understanding of the fact that they don't like certain words that I use, and I respect that 100%. But it's a two-way street. People have to respect where I come from and what I've done with my work. And I know that my work has paved way for a lot of people, but people seem to forget that. I put myself out there constantly. I get death threats. I get people saying all kinds of things to me. But for some reason, people don't tend to remember that. They only remember that I said tranny or that I said people should disclose things. But they don't really understand where I come from.
It seems to me like lots of transgender stories are very similar in that way.
Yeah, they totally are.
The kind of the plus, the binary, I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to fix it. And then when I fix it and I've got over the journey, we're happy.
Well, sometimes, hopefully. A lot of times they're not happy. So let's talk about a lot of the community that isn't happy.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's so much of the community that isn't happy? There's really a lot of the community that still perpetuates this anger and this sort of like, I'm not happy, so I don't want you to be happy.
Yeah.
You know that they do that.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what it is and why they feel that they need to perpetuate that sort of hate within our own community. When we don't learn to love each other and love each other's journey, being your journey is separate from my journey. It's not, no way is it going to be the same. And I respect that totally. But let's not argue about this. Let's worry about what the people out there think about us. We need to change what the world thinks about us, not what we think about each other.
And hasn't it changed so quickly over the last few years?
Well, what the world thinks about us.
the world thinks
But
about
what
us.
we think about each other is getting worse.
Really?
Oh, 100%.
Wow.
100%. It's gotten worse, and it's gotten more intense, and it's gotten more dividing our community. And I'm more concerned with that than I am concerned with the outside world. Because if we don't learn to love ourselves first, the outside world will never love us.
I just want to ask you one more question. If there's one piece of advice that you could give to somebody who's thinking about transitioning right at the very start of their journey, if there's just a single piece of advice that you could give to someone, what would it be?
Well, that's a difficult question, I think. I think I would say really do your research. Is that really where you feel like you need to go? And what does that mean? I mean, it can mean so much, right? But
Learn stuff.
learn
Go and
stuff.
learn stuff.
There's so much to learn.
There's so much stuff on the internet.
Yep.
It's massive.
And learn to love yourself. I think that's the first most important thing.
Learn to love yourself. Fabulous. Buck, thank you for talking with me today. It's great. You've been listening to Sammy and with Buck Angel on Bent TV.
Wow. Back after this short break.
Welcome back to Transmission on Bent TV. I'm Sammy Cameron, and today we're talking about coming out as trans. Joining me today are Grace, Ashley, and Jez. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So is coming out the hardest step of the whole trans experience?
Yeah, I'd probably say yes. Coming out to the family is probably the hardest thing you'd have to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very challenging, and it's something that you worry most about, and it's the thing that sort of weighs down on your mind a lot of the time, is how you're going to tell people about yourself, about being trans, when perhaps you don't actually fully understand what that means.
And the heart races, the
Yeah,
heartbeats.
yeah.
You can measure your heart rate
The mouth
increasing.
goes dry.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Difficult and challenging for you.
Yeah, I was crying. I was sick, and I told my mum that, you know, on deep down inside I'm a boy and I'm going to make changes. But you know, I was like hyperventilating like this, and you know, she held my hand and said, you know, deep down inside, I know you've always been a boy. But she said to me, you'll always be my little girl. And so she needed a bit of time to deal with that, and I think that that's okay now. But then she also said, when you think of your parents, think that they'll just get over it. So she sort of gave me her blessing, but that was intense. Like, it was such a big relief just to hear those words, because I don't think anybody wants to be rejected by their family. Mm-hmm. That's just, you know, an awful feeling, the thought that that might happen. And it does happen for people.
So it is it's probably the most difficult challenging part to deal with.
Yeah.
So how do you go about doing it? What are some of the options? How do you tell people?
I've been asked this question a lot, and the one thing I recommend to people and how to come out is to do it in person. Especially your family, do it in person. Don't do it via text message or Facebook or anything like that, because it's too impersonal. You want to make it a little bit more personal than that. That's the one thing I tell people.
I think there was a temptation. I think my first time of ever coming out, I actually kind of, you know, allowed myself to be caught. So in that respect, and that's not a good way to do it either,
No.
because people,
Yeah.
again, are not really ready for what they're going to see. And I think, you know, yeah, you need to be really in control of the situation. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. I actually put a website together that explained it, because I knew that nobody would understand it. So I tried to explain it and use it as an educational process. And then I did tell individual people one-on-one, but I had so many people to tell, I couldn't go and talk to each individual person. So eventually then I sent a link to the website, and that worked really effectively because people actually learned from it.
Yeah.
And so you spoke to your family
Yeah,
first?
I spoke to my family in person, but I wrote letters to friends because I was overseas and I wanted. There weren't many people like me in Melbourne, so I wanted to write some emails and get people to start using the name and right pronoun and talk to each other and spread the word. I really like how you can get the rumour mill to kind of work in your advantage that way. But yeah, I mean, face to face, I agree, is pretty.
It's
pretty
hard
powerful.
though.
It's hard.
It's hard though.
It is hard.
I remember sitting down and talking to my children, and they were the first people I told. And it's pretty hard because they know of you as one person, and they're suddenly discovering something completely different. And it's difficult to do so. But you've got to get the words right. So I actually wrote everything down, had a script to read from, and got someone to check it first. And that way I had something that wasn't beating around the bush. I got to the point pretty quickly.
But it is important, though, to actually make it a positive thing, regardless of how sort of like concerned you're feeling about it and concerned that they might have a negative reaction. I've found it really helpful it's fun. Actually, I'm happy, and one of the biggest things, the feedback that I've got from friends and relatives and stuff, is how much happier I am having come out.
Isn't it funny?
Yeah.
We have all this anticipatory anxiety that it's going to be this terrible, horrible thing. And I've certainly discovered, and most people I've talked to, you actually find out that most people are supportive.
They are supportive, and I find that like in my personal transition myself, like I found that I was able to make friends a lot easier too. Because growing up, I struggled to make friends and I didn't have any. But after coming out, like I've got a great social network now.
Yeah, I've had the same thing
Great.
happen to me.
Yeah.
And what about when you've only come out to some people and you haven't come out to others? Particularly for me, I was presenting as one person among some people and presenting as another person in front of other people. And it started to get really complicated because, there was all these people I hadn't actually told. I remember actually swapping and changing 4 times in the one day. Just before I decided I can't do this anymore, I have to tell the whole world. So what about those sorts of things? You don't know who you've actually told yet.
Yeah, it can get a bit complicated, and I I live like that, but I see myself as very fluid anyway. So I'm not kind of at one end of the binary spectrum or the other. So I also have to sort of try and figure out who I've come out to and actually in which presentation I'm in at the time when I came out. So
Wow, that would be so interesting.
it can get quite
a bit
complicated.
awkward.
So
Yeah,
there's
it's
people that knows kind of 3 versions of me.
It's
One, the other, or the
what's,
mix.
what's my name at the moment? What clothes am I wearing? What are my mannerisms going to be? What's my voice going to sound like? All sorts of things. And your mind's just processing all this complex. Oh gosh, which way am I presenting at the moment? Very challenging.
Yeah.
What about narratives that you may use to hide your past from those that you may not wish to disclose your status in the future, like stories to sort of help you explain things?
I find it doesn't really matter what you did in the past. Like, you're still you. Regardless of your gender or anything, you were still being you. So you just don't use any pronouns like, I, me, and that sort of thing. It's really, really simple to do. So in that respect, that's the way I see it. But yeah.
Yeah. No, well, I'm just pretty open about everything that I've done anyway. So it's like, this is who I am now, and that's part of me is my personal history. So the fact that I might have played certain types of sports and things doesn't mean, and I went to a boys' school, isn't a sort of, that's the truth anyway. So I don't have an issue with sort of, how people might react to that. I think they probably realise that anyway.
Yeah.
I just change it to when I was a little boy, or when I was 15, or something like that. But sometimes I think it's important to be able to talk about an experience that happened because the important part of that story was that I was a girl, and I like talking about that with close friends and family. But
I find for some, like my family, it's very difficult for my daughter to know how to refer to me in the third person when she wasn't want to disclose my status as somebody else. Yeah, I think it can be challenging for others in our lives, not just ourselves. And any terrible reactions?
Probably just my dad. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty
That's-
pretty limited though, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
I counted 95% of the people I talked to were really positive. So
Definitely.
Anyway, I'd like to thank you for joining us today and talking to us. I'm Sammy Cameron on transmission for Bent TV. Look forward to seeing you next time.